We have a terrific task ahead of us. We have a shattered world around us, and we must help to rebuild it.
Сегодня еще раз обращаюсь ко всем гражданам России.
The President of the United States.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Hello and welcome to the 9th episode now of Seats of Power. Today we have a very special guest in Tim Diacono, Lovin Malta. I'm obviously joined by Kyle and JP as usual. How are you guys?
Thanks for having me.
Fine.
Fine, yeah.
Yeah, obviously you're a journalist, naturally. You work at a very widespread and popular platform in Malta. I would arguably say it's probably the most popular platform in the country. And throughout the season that we've been doing these episodes, we've obviously tried to bring forth a lot of different, discussions and perspectives. So naturally, someone who is working in journalism is very interesting in this case because what we have been talking about quite frequently was, media issues and when it comes to, sensationalism, journalism, things like that. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't really tend to try and, do interviews. We prefer to do conversations, naturally. So today, the main topic of discussion is media, basically journalism, the issues when it comes to clickbait, things like that. Yeah. So I am of the opinion that the media in Malta is very sensational.
Okay.
Obviously,
in what sense?
Media is a very blanket term. So, who am I talking about? It's different to compare like companies like Times of Malta and Free Hour, for example, because they operate in a different kind of sector, in my opinion. But I would say that a lot of the news content which is similar to a lot of countries, is based on immediacy, quick news, and there is, I think, is lost a lot of the thorough investigation that journalism is supposed to encapsulate. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, define sensationalism though, because different people have different meanings for it. So I imagine you mean like something that's. So look, what sensational means often is that people are interested in it, right? So there's a lot of discussion about it. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, how is that exactly a wrong thing? And can you please define what sensational means?
I'm not even arguing that it is particularly wrong, but I think what happens is that a lot of people then don't realize that content that they're consuming is out there more because of the discussion around and because it generates clicks rather than because it's in the public interest. Certain items, I would say.
It's meant to provoke, is what you're saying. That's what sensationalism is.
Well, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, there is definitely an element of that. But furthermore, I would say that there's also this kind of, phenomenon that a lot of these media houses, they tend to definitely do good journalism. There's obviously instances. I'm not going to argue that they don't. And at the same time, however, that gets conflated because a lot of people will say, and this is a critique that is aimed at Lovin Malta quite frequently, which is, for example, if you're posting, posts about something to do with the Kardashians that nobody cares about, but at the same time, then there's legitimate journalistic integrity in certain other items that I feel like people critique it and they forget that a company can do both, essentially.
Exactly, and it's always been like this. I mean, like nowadays, obviously, the main focus of the media is online. But I think sometimes some people forget that, people talk about newspapers in the past. Newspapers have, because they're still around, but they have lots of different types of content. I mean, it's not just hard news.
Naturally.
I mean, there's also many papers that have celebrity stuff, food related stuff, travel related stuff. It's never been just about one particular topic. So I don't see the problem of different types of content coexisting on the same platform.
No, naturally, and I don't necessarily. I'm not advocating for that to be removed or anything, but I think the problem is that there's two problems to this. I don't think it's made patently very clear when it comes to content that is differentiated between, for example, something being a tabloid kind of issue and something being a newsworthy type of issue. Or if it is, I don't think most people notice it or most people care enough to look into some things. Like this is part of the, for example.
The reality is that different people care about different things at different points of in time as well.
For sure.
So if you want to attract like the largest segment of people, sometimes you have to provide different pieces of news and pieces of content. So even you're saying nobody cares about this. It's not necessarily the case. Maybe you don't care. Maybe I don't care. Some people do. And that's like an issue that people face. You have to say like, look, just because I think one way doesn't mean everybody does.
No, for sure. That's obviously true. Now, what I'm saying is more necessarily, for example, that there is a conflation, and I think a lot of this critique is actually unfair because for people to invalidate something that any media house does because they also at the same time post things that are more like entertainment based or infotainment based, it's unfair. Because there's a lot of honest work that goes on behind the scenes to do that stuff, to produce that stuff. So I'm not gonna say it shouldn't be done. It's just a question of whether there is. Firstly, I think, in my opinion, that some credibility is then lost in those cases because, for example, especially when it comes to articles online, well, obviously people read things through on their phone, right? So on their phone, you see an article being posted on Facebook, which isn't obviously the full article, that gives you a link to a website.
Yes.
And that link, generally speaking, has only the headline, maybe the first few lines under the headline, nothing major. But it is those headlines themselves that they attempt to attract people, and it's what they should do.
Yeah.
But attracting and then giving the rest of the story, which gives more context, which may not necessarily line up with the headline, that is where, in my opinion, that there is a lot of mismatch.
So I think we need to differentiate between exciting headlines and headlines that misinform. And this is where the issue of clickbait comes in. So look, at the end of the day, as a journalist, you want people to read what you're doing, right? I mean, if you're just writing for yourself, I mean, fair enough. I mean, what's the point, right? You want to inform and you want to have people read what you say. The issue is would be if the title promises one thing and then the content doesn't deliver. So, for example, there are a lot of these amateur sports pages, for example, where there's a title, like Liverpool have just signed a new player. And okay, then you click on it, and it turns out it's the under-16s team. That's not fair because then you think, you're promising something, which is basically you think that's the club has published a new player, but it's actually the under-16s. That's where the clickbait comes in.
Yeah.
If, for example, though, you say this has just signed a very exciting new player, and okay, the title's a bit okay, to use the word sensational, but in a way that attracts people and gets them to read the content, but the content does deliver, then for me that's fine, because that is fine. But for example, I have an example in mind. I'm not going to say which media house it is because I don't want to paint anyone, but I guess from the headline people will understand what I'm talking about. But there was this article written, and it was about Joseph Muscat, where he purportedly said something along the lines of, remember, you're talking to a former prime minister. Yeah.
Now, I understand, obviously, that there's context to that. I'm not going. That
was during
myself,
a court case, right?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm myself not going to be the type of person to read the headline and ignore the rest of the content. Now, there's a lot of people who do that because either they don't have time or the interest or whatever.
Yes.
Now, if you read that headline, the first thing that pops into my mind is, "Wow, this guy is arrogant." And there's a lot of those things where you from a headline you can take a lot of connotations and a lot of different interpretations of a headline. Now then I read the whole article and I kept thinking, well, okay, then you're quoting Joseph Muscat saying other things that in the article themselves aren't being refuted. So you've given me a headline, you've given me a perspective to some degree of what to think, and then in the rest of the article you've not shown me exactly why the initial feeling I get from the headline should be justified.
Is it telling you what to think, or is it generating interest, though? Because imagine, this is about a court case. Imagine the title had said, "The case against Joseph Muscat has continued." You wouldn't have read it, right? Probably not.
And I understand their point, but at the same time, maybe it's not directly telling me what to think, but subconsciously, if you read an article, if you read the headline and it's a quote of someone, and the quote is at best it's arrogant, at worst could be even worse. But the point is, if it's creating a sort of image in my head involuntarily from reading a headline, and then the rest of the article doesn't necessarily justify that thought. Now, maybe that wasn't the intention, but the point is that there's things should be done more carefully.
Well, in this case, if I remember it well, I had read the article, but this was a recent court case, correct, where Joseph Muscat has been charged, and I think it was the Attorney General, or it's not it was someone who works in the Attorney General's office, was questioning him. He didn't like the line of questioning, and he's blurted this out, like look what you're speaking to. You're speaking to a former prime minister.
Yeah.
Now he did say that, right?
Yes.
So you're saying that the media house, you're not going to mention names, I won't mention, but I know what you're talking about. They should have just said, like, what exactly though? It's not. It's not misquoting him, right? It's something that he.
No. But there's so many examples. I can't necessarily.
So, for example, recently there was I had seen a court report, or again, it was, I think it might have actually been the same case where. I wasn't in the courtroom, but I read an article in the Times where Joseph Muscat's lawyer they're trying to get this forensic expert to testify physically in Malta. He doesn't want to come, and anyway, the report said that his lawyer said, if needs be, we will go to Ireland myself. That wasn't in the title. That was nested somewhere in like the fifth, not even eighth paragraph or so. And I read it. They just skimmed through it. And again, like when you're in court, I've been in court before. It's very, very difficult, first of all, because you're on the spot, right? You have to like type as you go along. There's no recording to look back on. So if somebody says something and you miss it, that's it. I personally believe that a lot of these cases, and I've said this before, should be, if not live streamed, at least available online.
I agree with you completely.
Because there's also like, because when you're there, you get to see like the culmination of a lot of these cases. You see all these protagonists there. Court is a great equalizer, right? Because everybody's like suddenly on the same level playing field in front of the law, whether you're a former prime minister, whether you're not, whatever. And you're there. Sometimes you're by yourself because there aren't many court reporters in Malta. There was one who resigned recently from Malta Today, so there's very few who are actually in court every day. So you have to write what they say. This is like a sitting that could last around hours, give or take. So you have all of this. You have to see, and it's not always linear, right? Court, because someone's saying something and the lawyer interjects and say, "Oh, what's he saying?" And he quotes a law, and you have to write this law. Okay, so what does this law refer to? And again, sometimes they mumble, or sometimes it's too far away, or sometimes it's a packed courtroom and you can't hear exactly because people are whispering. So it's very, very challenging to report in court, and then to make it interesting, right? Because if you're going to spend all that time over there, and you have to then find something that generates interest in it. And in this case, if he did say something like that in court, I feel it is worth a headline. It's he did say it. If it was misquoted, then that's wrong, obviously. But if he did say it, which apparently he did, because I don't think he retracted it or anything, I think it is fair then to bring to use it to bring people's attention to the ongoing court proceedings.
Okay, I see the point you're making. Did you want to?
Yeah, I do agree with you on the final point that if he said it and he didn't retract it, why not leave it in there? It's meant to get people to read it. But what I maybe don't agree with you said you'd have the court cases available online.
For major cases.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I would agree with you per se. I think it depends on the case as well. But I don't see an issue maybe with having the cases recorded and available for the journalists who are there, so they can actually have it fully.
So what I was originally going to say was basically that a consequence of, for example, social media use and again this idea of immediate news has maybe been to a detriment to the traditional kind of slow journalism, which is supposed to be more thorough, more investigative, more factual. So I think, and I'm not necessarily pointing fingers to anyone because everyone is affected by that, but I think that's definitely part of the main point, which is that perhaps certain items are getting more attention than others because they get more eyeballs on it, regardless of whether it's actually more important or less important to the public interest.
Good one. So first of all, I think, like, just specifically locally, I think considering the number of journalists and the number of resources that Malta has in comparison with other countries, I think there has been more of this. Like, I think I haven't conducted a study or anything, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's a higher degree of this sort of stuff than in other countries as well, when you just consider the numbers and the scale. But also, at the end of the day, I believe that the market decides. At the end of the, like, if the people decide what to read. There's a lot of stuff out there. There is a lot of slow stuff as well. There's also a lot of fast stuff, yes, because nowadays, like you said, I mean, a lot of you read a lot on your phone. I mean, it can be very quick sometimes to publish something. But people do decide. People have a choice nowadays, now more than ever before, of what to read, what news to consume, what type of content to view, who to follow, who to not follow. There's a lot of stuff out there.
No, I agree with you what you're saying, but ultimately I think to some degree whether the market prefers a certain type of content or not is not necessarily congruent with what is in the public interest, and I think that goes for many industries, not just journalism per se. So there's that. Now, obviously, in Malta is a country which sadly we've seen the assassination of a journalist. So to some degree, I think there's gonna be people who were either they intended to go into journalism or to be investigative reporters and things like that, which definitely took a step back out of fear or whatever. Now that in itself, I think, plays an important role in how people view journalism in general, because if there was no assassination of Daphne, a lot of people might be like, journalism is just a job, an occupation. But in reality, I think that kind of made people realize that, listen, what that practice is as important as free speech is, or it's a result of free speech, in a functioning democracy. So I also think that to some degree there's been kind of this, I guess, loss of those people who are inclined to do that vocation, because ultimately that's what I think it is. It's a vocation. It's not just something to make money out of.
Yeah. Well, look, she was also she's also been in the industry for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
So she had been, if I'm not mistaken, working in it since before I was even born, or around the year I was born, give or take. And such experience is very, I mean, it comes with time as well, right?
Of course.
So it's not like one person. I mean, this is just obviously, even putting aside the horrific aspect and all the consequences of the assassination, just losing somebody who has been in the field for so long, you're going to lose a lot. And obviously, when the more you're in, the more you learn, the more contacts you have, the more you understand how certain systems work, and then this is normal. And obviously, yes, an assassination that's happened in 2017. That's when 8 years ago or so. Yeah, and this case is still going on.
Yeah,
that does like play a role in that sense. Yes, of course.
Yeah, I think it puts a lot of people off from following her footsteps ultimately, which is not something that any democratic nation should aspire to. Now,
what I would suggest, though,
yeah.
I mean, if honestly, because at the end of the day, sometimes I feel this is somehow missing from the conversations, that journalists are first and foremost human beings. We're not robots. We're not. Sometimes I get this impression, right? And I'd mentioned I was recently invited to give a speech in Parliament as part of this media forum, and I started off by saying this. Sometimes I get the impression that when we talk about the industry, about journalism industry, we refer to them either as like, the heroes of democracy, the last bastion or whatever, or as like cruel, nasty, heartless beings who who just want to destroy people's lives. The reality is human beings at the end of the day. That means that we have our own lives, our own ambitions, apart from the job, not just the job itself, but apart from it. And yeah, this is something I think, and we're also workers at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So this is something that I think any discussion on it needs to be there, because I don't like make it out as though it's some be a bit like can be a bit realistic about it too. I mean, it's a job, it's a fun job, but it's humans working it, humans who make mistakes, humans who have their own lives as well, and yeah, that should be the starting point, I feel.
No, I agree with you, and I know the discussion. I saw a clip of it at least. I'm not certain if I saw the whole clip, but regardless, and you definitely raised a lot of points which I agreed with fundamentally, even when it comes to things like hate speech and things like that. What I would say is that yes, journalists obviously are human beings. Same goes for politicians. So you should treat human beings with dignity and respect.
Yeah.
At the same time, and I hope I don't sound like I'm going to say something horrible.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. I can take it.
At the same time, there's an incredible responsibility, obviously, that journalists and politicians, to kind of put them in the same box in this case, have, towards the people. Now, a politician's job is supposedly to represent the people in government, and the journalist's job is supposedly to give the people information so that they can vote accordingly to factual information, to be informed, an informed public ultimately. Now, maybe I'm being unfair, but what I believe I'm seeing, and perhaps I'm just wrong because this is just my opinion, right? But what I believe I'm seeing is that a lot of what actually gets more attention and more hype is not necessarily the things that are in the public interest. In the sense that important things, I'm not even saying intentionally, but the market, as you said, doesn't really pay attention to them sometimes. And I bring the example of when it came to COVID, for example, where a lot of people were, censored and persecuted for having opinions, which now, 3 or 4 years later, are vindicated.
Yeah.
I don't know what you would think about that.
So they're saying that so there's two different things. I think that the market doesn't, or the people don't focus on what's in their own interest sometimes.
And I think that results from an apathy of politics, ultimately, realistically.
I mean, look, I don't think I'm not sure I agree with you on that. I mean, obviously, people at the end of the day have their own lives. Sometimes they can't focus so much and get into so in depth on an issue that as sometimes you maybe wish they would.
Yes, I agree.
And this is something that journalists face, or something that politicians face. They're trying to explain something, but then people will just latch on to one small thing, and it's this constant balancing act as well. But people are turned on, as in on current affairs. I mean, when there's something. So, for example, yesterday, we published a post about an MP saying that school opening hours should be longer. There was an immense reaction by the public. This isn't the sign of people who aren't interested or who are apathetic. I mean, obviously, if we're talking about cases that have been going on for years and years and years and years, and then obviously, yes, you have to keep following them. But at a certain point, I think it is natural for people to not be as interested as they once were in the same topic, right?
I agree with you completely, and that's a result, obviously, of our busy lives and things like that, where people tend to focus less on politics because it's simply not the major thing in their lives. People have families, people have jobs to maintain. So obviously, that is a result of that.
And also interest wanes, rises and wanes according to the scenario, right? So if there's something massive happening, people are going to be more interested. If there isn't, people are going to be more relaxed. But the moment there is something, then it's normal, right? And it's not just in Malta, that happens everywhere. Not everyone. People you often get interested in politics when there's something that really, really impacts them as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't know if you wanted to say something.
I was going to say that was the article where they said that school hours should reflect working hours for parents as well.
Yes. And there was an MP at the Zamit Lewis who agreed with it. And a lot of people obviously disagreed, some agreed, but there was a lot of discussion about it because this is something that all of a sudden that it interests them, right?
It impacts everyone as well.
And it impacts everyone.
I wanted to jump on something a little, not necessarily different, but still in the same area, but a bit...
I'm sorry, what are you going to say about the COVID thing, though?
For example, I personally myself, I had certain opinions back in 2020, 2021, which for reasons or other, they were, when you look at Facebook and Twitter and things like that, there was shadow banning, there was censorship. I mean, even Zuckerberg's come out, Twitter files have been, released. So what I'm talking about wasn't necessarily a certain example of something specific, but a culture there was around COVID dissent, essentially. Now, whether it was anti-lockdown measures or anti-masking or it was skepticism of vaccinations, issue was that the discussion was by big tech companies, I'm not necessarily saying by media corporations, but by big tech companies there was this attempt to stifle the debate.
Under pressure by their governments.
Oh yes, yeah, for sure. I mean,
but that's why they did so, right? I mean, even that's what the Twitter files are mostly about, right?
Yes,
that
completely.
It showed how the government kept constantly ordering Twitter to take down certain posts.
Yep.
I mean, that's look, in the benefits of hindsight, I personally find it a bit intriguing, let's put it this way, how suddenly the world kind of decided that this pandemic doesn't exist any longer, and now let's all go back to normal, and now no one can stop speaking against everything is fine, you can just speak about it as though it's something in the past. Back then the culture was different, right? When there's a threat and there's a lot of uncertainty, the rules change as well, and that's something that I experienced it for the first time during the pandemic. I think a lot of people did, because all of a sudden that yes, even issues such as and then you realize like how flimsy these rights are, even things like free speech. The fact that all of a sudden all it takes is one threat and suddenly there's all these limits and all these restrictions, and then you learn to safeguard how precious it is, right?
Yes, exactly. That is ultimately my point. But I don't want to because I could talk for 4 hours about COVID, I can assure you. No, what I wanted to jump on was basically this. What we've definitely seen it abroad in America and things like that, where there is kind of this rejection of the mainstream media, essentially, and where there is a turn to independence and what people would call citizen journalists and things like that. So, for example, even popular podcasts like Joe Rogan and things like that, which aren't traditionally known. You're not going to necessarily say that Joe Rogan is a journalist, but at the same time, the sort of interviews that he kind of is, he conducts, there's definitely information in them that are to the public interest. Now, in Malta, we have multiple examples. We have John Mallia, for example. We have Ricky Caruana. Now, I want to specify mostly Ricky Caruana because I'm a big fan of what he's doing, and
so am I.
And I think what he's doing is not only do I think that people in general don't understand how important it is, but I think he himself probably doesn't even realize how important what he is doing is. I want to get your perspective on what do you think about this kind of shift from the mainstream, newspapers and like TV channels to kind of more independent, more individual sort of.
Yeah. Okay. So I believe that at the end of the day, the best way to have a healthy media landscape is to have pluralism, right? Something I've always believed. Why? Because people get opportunities to see things from different perspectives. You have, people for then there's so much information out there and so many potential avenues. It's impossible for one person or even one media house to focus on everything. It's not possible. Even if I would hazard a guess, if every single journalist, if myself, Lovin Malta, Ricky Caruana, everyone had to be in the same platform, we still wouldn't be able to get everything
course.
done because there's a lot out there. So the more pluralism, the healthier it is, the healthier the debate, especially if, in my opinion, it's not controlled by politicians, because obviously in Malta we're a bit in a very unique example, because for many years politicians have been controlling the discourse, right? I mean, you have even the 2/3 of the, not even 2/3, 3/3 of the TV landscape is controlled by the parties and the government. So they had a complete stronghold. So yeah, no, I definitely I'm a fan of Ricky Caruana's podcast. I listen to him. I've listened to quite a few of his podcasts. I think he's doing a very, very good job. And in fact, Lovin Malta has featured him and shared him and promoted him as well. In terms of the shift, I'm not so sure exactly if it's a shift or if it's a distribution, right? Because look, if you have the more options you have, obviously people are going to have more options to choose from. And so yes, then it might seem a little bit like a shift. What it is there's a lot of there's more distribution right nowadays. There's no few people who control the information. This is also thanks to the internet, thanks to social media. And yes, different people are speaking out, different people also realizing that they can have a lot of influence by speaking out, and I think this is a very good thing for democracy.
Can I add? I feel like I disagree with you that there's a shift. I agree with what you said. There's more distribution. There's more choice.
A singular point. I think a shift is more viewed. You can see it more in America and globally.
America is a different context, though.
Whereas in Malta it is distribution, as you would say.
In America is a very different context. America, like sometimes, sometimes I think we forget how massive America is, right?
Naturally.
So if you have one media house that's based in whatever, Washington or California, and they're then covering stuff that's happening in Utah. Sometimes it's like someone from Malta, following something that's happening in Germany. This is even though it's the same country, it's incredibly it's so massive that it does make it harder for that media house as well. So yes, and obviously there's the whole discussion about the media in America. We can get into it, but. Again, I don't necessarily see a shift. I see a distribution, because like at the end of the day, these platforms, these are still out there, and just people have more options and more choices of what to see, and what news and what content to consume.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
I feel like in Malta as well, we have lots of I wouldn't call them media houses or news sites, gossip sites, really. Like, for example, I don't know if I'm saying something wrong. For example, 3 Hour Side Street. I wouldn't call them really news sites.
They
myself.
do some news as well.
They do, but I think they're more gossip sites and more content based rather than, as in content for social media rather than news reporting. In my opinion, we have lots of those. I don't know if I'm being incorrect.
I definitely agree with you.
Something like Guida comes to mind when you say that.
Or Guida.
Yeah.
Well, look, I think that they do a lot of good work as well. These platforms. I don't think that we should just dismiss them so entirely. At the end of the day, if people are on one platform, you should the mantra should be is that you should be where they are as well, right? So if people are focused on, my Exciter is very focused on Instagram, for example, then they're putting their efforts there. And again, it's another option, right? So there are a group of mostly young people, and they're trying something out. Even 3 Hour, I think they're doing 3 Hours. They're doing a very good job as well.
No, I'm not saying they're doing a bad job. I'm saying that they are more. They're not like Lovin or like obviously not the Times, because Times originally at heart it's a newspaper. I think there's sort of. Not a gap, but I think they're different than, for example, what Lovin Malta is, rather than.
There are some similarities, obviously,
yes,
but they're different. Again, like people have different options and different avenues from which to get their information from, and I think that's a very healthy thing, to be honest. I genuinely do.
No. It is a healthy thing. I mean, I rue the day that there's a country with only one sort of information.
Yeah, exactly. Then when I was like a communist state, then right,
Yeah.
it's just one centralized source of information.
Yeah.
And again, if you're obviously allowed not to like a particular platform, but there's so many to choose from. No one's forcing you to follow a particular
And
page.
even-
Yes, obviously. I'm not saying that I dislike them or they're doing bad work.
And
I'm just
yes,
making a
and
distinction.
apart from that, like even to have that sort of opinion, to say I don't like this platform, to be informed about it, you need to have scrutinized a lot of their content like continuously, and because they pump out so much content, it's almost nearly impossible to actually do that. Honestly, in my opinion. JP, you've been awfully quiet for 35 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Regarding this, I will raise a point, and I want to see what you think of this. We need to compare like the media we have today to what we had before. Of course, like the actual traditional newspaper. So I agree that like news portals do much of the same work that traditional newspapers did. I mean, if you open the website for the Times or for the Lovin, you have a selection of articles there, and you have the free choice. Now, I pose this question and this idea. Most people don't. At least I don't get the impression that most people are actively going on the portals, but rather they're finding articles on social media like Facebook or Instagram and moving from there. So does that make? Well, you could say it makes it more democratic, but at the same time, is there an aspect you would say that there's a sort of hive mind mentality where the more provocative things is, the more shares, the more engagement it gets, and then the social media's algorithm dictates what gets pushed up and what doesn't.
That's a loaded question. I've never heard one.
Oh, that is a load. One. So first of all, we have the data. I mean, obviously different platforms have their own. So people are going in our articles and reading them. We do have that sort of data. Again, the algorithms work according to what people like, right? This is, I mean, again, I don't have access to these algorithms, but generally, the more people are liking and sharing a particular piece of content, the more likely it is to be recommended to you, right? Because the algorithm knows, oh, this is something that people are paying attention to, therefore we should recommend it to more people. Then the thing is that why are people paying attention to it? Is it if they're paying attention to it because it's genuinely interesting, then it's fair, right? I mean,
And the algorithm is doing a good job in those cases, of course. But at the same time, like,
I think what you're saying is that some certain important article, for example, can get pushed away.
it can easily be pushed away by the
because
algorithm
not
if it
being
does not
interacted.
catch enough attention.
and that's a challenge. And that's a challenge, I think, for the media industry to find a way to make these types of content more engaging as well.
Because I mean, when you bought a newspaper in the past, or even today, you buy a newspaper, you pay for it, you get it, and you have everything on it. Whether it's information about celebrities, politics, sports, you have everything on it. You may not be interested in the subject, but you have that there. It's available.
If I can counter your argument, I feel like that comes more to the person rather than the media house.
So look, let me just
It's not even an argument against the media house. It's
No,
more
yeah,
of
I
the
guess.
reliance on social media to push
Okay, fair enough.
what the media houses publish.
Well, yeah, that's the reality. That at the end of the day, if people are getting their news from social media, then media platforms have to be there. If you're just going to be selling a newspaper and not have a social media presence, and again, this comes back to my original point of, as a journalist, you want people to follow you. That should be the ultimate goal. You want people to read what you're saying, you want people to watch your interviews and stuff like that. But you made an interesting point, and I think the challenge is how to make something engaging. So recently, there was this video, which was a 12-minute video or so, of not 16 minutes, which is quite long in modern terms. It was by Mark Lawrence Zamit, and I'd like to give him a shout out over here for explaining
Vitals.
Yeah, I think
the
we all
vitals
saw
here.
that video.
So
and
that's
admirable.
And exactly,
great
so
video, yeah.
that's this is a very good example, because this is a very technical, very detailed story. It's quite old as well. It's something that's almost, I think, Daphne started writing about it in 2014 or
Yes,
so, so it's
over
almost 10
10
years old,
over-
exactly, if
over
not
10 years.
over. There's a lot of legal stuff, there's a lot of people involved. So, and it's one of those where, one might say it's something that the people, it might be difficult to get them engaged, but he did a very good job. And that video did really, really well. So, yeah, I think it's so that shows that there are ways, I think, to get people interested in affairs of national consequence.
I will take this chance to segue what we're saying about this specific video to the previous shift we're speaking about of people like Vicky Caruana or Joe Rogan, for instance. I mean, I think it's undeniable that Mark Lawrence is fairly charismatic as a person. And if you watch the video, he makes jokes in it, he's
Yeah,
charismatic.
exactly. Yeah.
He entertains while explaining. And I feel that, especially due to social media and this hyperconnectivity that we have, that content of the type gets actually pushed out and people digest it.
Infotainment, yeah.
Infotainment, it gets digested much easier by the public than just reading an article.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know if you disagree. I want your opinions on
That these sound bites in a sense gain more attention than something a bit at length. You mean what?
I mean, like, they get more attention than traditional articles or.
Well,
that
yeah. I
sort of
mean,
content.
the visual aspect is obviously always going to be important. Again, it depends what the article is, because if it's a good article, like I believe cream rises to the top. So if something has quality, eventually it's.
You would hope so, yes.
I would hope so, and I also believe so as well. Not all the time, but in a general sense, I think it does. Yes. I think people do want to be informed at the end of the day. I don't think nobody wants to say like I don't. Like people are interested, right, in their surroundings at the end of the day.
Yeah.
No.
But it is a challenge, obviously, and also the fact that when you put something out there, people have so many options as well nowadays, and it's not just it's not even just news against news or Ricky Kawana and everything. It's also lots of different entertainment avenues as well, right? So yes, it does kind of force people in the media industry to maybe like try different strategies, to try different tactics and types of content as well. See if this is working.
And
as well.
that is part of why I think Lovin Malta has gotten as popular and as big as it is, because it kind of seized the space that there was in the media and the social media kind of space, where nowadays I think I would comfortably say that Lovin Malta is the most popular kind of platform in Malta.
I think we're the first to recognize to be a social media based platform.
Yes. Now that is very interesting, because now I'm going to kind of explore a bit the American situation. For example, the American situation, what happened was you had Fox News, for example, who lose someone like Tucker Carlson, and then Tucker Carlson goes on his own, basically creates his own website and things like that. And he's massively popular on his own website. The numbers he gets are incredible. And then when you compare Fox...
Interviewing Putin, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's insane in general. But like you compare numbers of Fox before Tucker Carlson leaving and after Tucker Carlson leaving, and there's no comparison, right? Now, when it comes to Lovin Malta, for example, obviously it's in Malta, not in America, but point is that it's completely different in that it's completely social media based. So it isn't a case of like it's a traditional TV channel that nobody watches anymore or a traditional newspaper that nobody buys anymore. It's something that is accessible for the majority of people.
Yeah.
So and I think firstly, well, kudos to Lovin for creating that platform, and secondly, it's not only just significant because of the reach, but it's significant because it's arguably going to be there for a long time, because it's
and maintaining as well. I think
yes,
so.
Yes,
so
exactly.
it's one thing to to go from nothing to popularity, it's another thing to maintain it as well.
For sure, because then at the same time, the more reach you have, the more responsibility you have.
Yeah, and the more people who want to drag you down as well.
Of course, naturally, and then that's when you see a lot of critique, which is basically baseless or it's coming from a really reductionist standpoint where there's no legitimacy to that.
That'll always be there.
Of course,
of
with
course,
more eyeballs, you see that more, and
Exactly.
even you see sometimes the Ricky Caruana comments, and it's hilarious because sometimes certain things are so obvious that you only need a pair of eyes and a pair of ears to see.
Which comments exactly? Which ones?
Oh, there's multiple comments. I saw, for example, I just saw the Bernard Grech interview.
Yeah.
And there was a comment, and I just finished it, and I went to the comments, and there was a comment where he was like, why didn't you ask about the death of the party? And then there was a reply to that, and it was like, he literally asked it at the end. It's just, so you don't have the attention to watch, and then you comment stupid stuff.
I've got that quite a few times.
I'm sure you have.
I've got that quite a few times. Like, why didn't you ask him this? Like, I did. It's over there. It's coming up, right?
Yes, but that's just, a natural consequence of things. And that thing per se shouldn't stop people from trying to create a discussion and, and broadcasting whatever they want to promote.
I mean, at the end of the day, like, you can't. People are going to say what they want, right? And sometimes, I think so. Ricky, I think, has this strategy of like deleting the insulting comments, right? But at the end of the day, people are going to. You can't control what people say. You can then remove the comments if you want, but if someone wants to, comment before watching the full interview, they can, right? Technically, they can.
It's then completely, up to other people to realize.
Look, I mean, sometimes you just have to. I feel like certain comments, like just take them on the chin. Obviously, some there's a line that has to be that can't be crossed. I feel, even out of self-respect. But there's but yes, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to become popular and going to be in the public eye, the more of these sorts of comments you're going to face, right?
Yeah, more love, more hate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you're never going to be, loved by everyone. That's impossible.
No.
And to be fair, that speaks to a bigger kind of conversation where people try and attempt to be as perfect as possible so that people love them and try and get as much positive attention as possible. But then, that's kind of impossible to reach, and it speaks on the authenticity of such.
And I think Ricky also made a bit of an interesting point, right? Because he had also interviewed Joseph Muscat before. And
fantastic interview, by the way. I just
yes. I haven't watched the Bernard. I watched parts of it. I haven't watched the full one yet. Though I like the one of Joseph Muscat. But again, like, people were then criticizing him for that, and he brought Bernard on, and all of a sudden it's the Labour supporters who are criticizing him. These sorts of things happen then, right? It's.
I think, to be fair, I think one of the best things that's going to come out of someone like Ricky, someone like John Malia as well, is that. Ultimately, you see these politicians or public figures, whoever they are, you see them for 2 hours straight, authentically. And put it this way: obviously, they can attempt to play a part for 2 hours, and a lot of politicians specifically are media trained to do that. So I'm not necessarily going to say it's impossible, but at the same time, when you see someone who's able to sit down for 2 hours without any notes and have an open conversation, it speaks to some degree of authenticity, and that, in my opinion, will help us to kind of sort of escape this partisan, disrespectful kind of insulting and things, and philosophy kind of this partisan, because he's Labour I hate him, because he's nationalist I hate him, things like that. I think that these long format interviews definitely help to kind of try and work against it.
And this is something that it's basically thanks to the internet that it's possible.
Yes,
we have to give credit where it's due, because on TV you're obviously restricted with slots. And the breaks and everything. Over here, you have more freedom. If you want a podcast to go on for up to 4 hours,
you can.
You can. And again, it's up to people if they want to listen to them or not. But yeah, some people would. And I mean, I have listened to podcasts at length, not all in one sitting. It'll be like some over here and then some while going on a walk and whatever.
Yeah. I think you wanted to say something, or was I mistaken?
No, no,
No, you guys were
Yes.
looking at each other. Huh?
Yeah, because you said you're the partisan thing,
Yeah.
and well,
Well, yes.
And I think you were referring to. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, about the difference between Harris and Trump when he decided to go on Joe Rogan.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. For
very,
that.
very
But-
freely, and then she wanted him to come over and began giving him all these
Like,
restrictions.
this is like my point is not to say that someone like Trump or whoever, like Bernie Sanders, who was on Joe Rogan and things like that. I'm not necessarily saying that just because they were on a 3-hour or 2-hour interview that they're being completely honest about
Yeah.
anything.
but they look more.
But at least there is that effort to humanize them. Because you can't humanize someone when you see a clip of 15 minutes that's scripted on TV. You humanize someone when you see them talk.
Well, you can actually. It is
Well,
possible. Yes.
Yes, but when there's at least obvious scripting to something, it's like, well, you either wrote that in advance, or someone wrote that for you in advance, and
Yeah.
it's not like I'm.
I think
seeing you
people have.
develop
Become, I
your
think
own
people have
thoughts.
become. I think people generally have become smarter as well in terms of realizing these sorts of. These sorts of tricks, and I mean, sometimes you have politicians who will have lots of PR people around them saying like certain things as like either don't wear your glasses or whatever because you're not looking directly into someone's eyes, or make sure your hands don't do this or don't do this, or say this word, keeps mentioning this word because it will enter in people's minds. I think people have generally become smarter to these kinds of tactics as well. So
No,
yes,
for sure.
I personally think, again, I'm not an American citizen, but from what I saw, I think Trump's interview on Joe Rogan's podcast boosted him.
No, for sure, completely. Because and that's the thing about Joe Rogan is that he's not necessarily got an echo chamber of followers. I wouldn't say so, at least. So when and again, it's part of the thing that, as like you mentioned about Mark Lawrence, he's charismatic, and I think Trump is always very charismatic. He's very funny. I think
It's one of his greatest strengths, of course.
it is, and you have to remember the guy was a TV personality for a long time,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
he's very recognizable and things like that. So it goes to show that there is definitely wisdom in that like long format, kind of unscripted, open-ended conversations where then you're going to have obviously the criticism of you didn't ask him this, you didn't ask him that.
But that's going to happen all the time.
That's going to happen, obviously.
That's going to happen all the
that's
time. I mean,
byproduct.
look, this happens as well. I mean, it often happens to me, at least. Whenever I finish an interview, I'll be looking at it later, and then afterwards, sometimes I'll say, "Oh, I should have asked that as well."
Yes,
These things happen all the time,
This is
so-
personally why I advocate that every politician or every candidate should be on that sort of like long format content type thing. They should present themselves in that before anything else, or at least at some point throughout their campaigning or whatever. Because I think
Bernard Gregg, I think he's invited. I got Robert Abela on for, how was it, like an hour and a half, I think, or something like that. Again, could have been longer, sure. But yes, no. I mean, ultimately, I am personally a fan of these. And this is an interesting thing. I don't have a solution to it, but it's a bit of I won't say a conflict, but on the one hand, these long form podcasts are becoming more popular. On the other hand, these short clips are also becoming very popular as well. So again, it's not necessarily it's
but
different.
then it's about choice. It's about,
Again, that's the whole point. It's about choice. Like, people have a wide variety of different types of content and interviews, whatever to choose from a 4-hour long podcast to a 20-second clip or soundbite. So people again have multiple avenues of content from which to choose from, and yeah, I mean, yeah, they're basically, people are free to choose.
No.
And again, different people, it's not only different people prefer different things. Sometimes you might want one and sometimes you might want another. It doesn't just mean just because I like listening to 4-hour long podcasts means that's the only thing I listen to or watch. I mean, I watch all sorts of things.
Yeah, I think to be honest, when because there's a lot of people obviously that see a clip and that's like 40 seconds or maximum minute clip, and then they're like, oh, but this sounds horrible or whatever, and the obvious thing to say is, did you watch the entire context, what they're talking about? So you can't really even comment on a tiny clip if it's not the full context. That's one thing. But secondly, I think it's the responsibility of the consumer to investigate exactly what has been said in context.
But you can. Let me just stop you there, because you can make an argument in 1 minute or 2 minutes.
Yes, of course. But
obviously, the 4 hours is to get a full,
yeah,
a full like wide analysis of who this person
no,
is.
yes, I agree with you completely, obviously. But for example, and there's a myriad of examples that you could take from Trump as a phenomenon, where some media outlets would clip up a specific thing he said, and then literally, if you see literally 30 seconds before it, which wasn't clipped, you see exactly the context in which he was talking, and whatever he said that seemed horrible in 40 seconds doesn't seem as horrible in 2 minutes. There was the aftermath of the Charlottesville riots, where he said essentially, firstly, he said, "I'm not talking about the white supremacists and the neo-Nazis because they should be."
I'm thinking about something else. Something about
totally,
when there was that comment about Liz Cheney, and basically he was saying that if she wants to, if she's so pro-war, she should go and go and be in the front line herself. And anyway, there was this whole like debate. Oh, she's saying that she should be shot or something like that. That wasn't exactly what he said, right? He was saying that, look, if you believe that we should you should fight, then go and fight yourself and see what it's really like on the ground as someone who can risk death.
I think that is
at any moment. Yes,
that's the danger of the clipping up things.
Yeah. No, that's true, and there's also a responsibility on the people doing that to make sure that you're not getting it out of context. But it is possible, obviously, to get a clip that gets a good argument in.
Naturally. In fact, that's what we try to do ourselves. When we release reels.
It does depend on the case, and I see something. I've mentioned this in previous episodes. It is quite common in European politics as well that politicians and MEPs for Europe are transitioning to more sort of short-form content as well. In Malta, Thomas Bayada is doing it. Daniel Tart sometimes doing it. In Europe, Phidias is doing it.
Yes, of course, I know Phidias.
Obviously, Phidias is a content creator. That's what he started from. So there is this shift in modern politics. Even the European Parliament themselves, they post lots of reels, informative reels. For example, I remember there was a reel with Metsola explaining how the grilling for the Commission will work. So there is this effort from politicians now. Hopefully it will transition into Malta and more politicians across the world, that they're trying to get the message across and trying to shift and stick to the times.
It has already, to a certain extent. I mean, there are a couple of MPs who do it pretty well. Like, for example, Darren Karabot has done a couple of good ones as well. But basically just managing to break down an argument. And again, it goes to show sometimes that you can like explain something in a brief amount of time, explain it well as well.
Yes.
So sometimes we have, in my opinion, is a bit of a problem in Malta, which is that speeches in Parliament are way too long. It's up to like half an hour, or if not even 20 minutes, half an hour of an MP speaking about one particular topic. Obviously, it's very difficult to keep somebody engaged for so long about
naturally,
and it's also hard for them, right? Because they have to say, what am I going to say for half an hour, and going on about whatever some new law about.
Of course,
some new property law.
I don't want to cut you off, but we've unfortunately reached the time limit, and sadly it went by too quickly. But we will be concluding today's episode, and we'll be seeing you next week for episode 10 of Seats of Power. So
thank you
for listening.
Thank you for being here.
Goodbye.